let's get started. So the author said, chapter, the woman differs from the man in 5 things in the prayer. The man clears his elbows from his sides and his stomach from his thighs while bowing and prostrating. So when the man bows, so his palms are on his knees, so his arms are at his sides, he wants to clear his elbows from his sides when he prays, and his stomach from his thighs while bowing. But I don't know how is that. This part, clearing his stomach from his thighs while bowing. Bowing means bending over. How do you do that? I don't know. I asked the sheikh who was teaching us, and he didn't know also. And prostrating, that's easier, yani. So when you prostrate, when you put your toes and your knees and your palms and your forehead to the ground, then the man wants to clear his stomach from his side. So that means his body is basically a little bit more spread out when prostrating. Also, when prostrating, the man is going to clear his elbows from his sides, so his body is more spread out in these positions, not pressed together. He recites aloud during the times of loud recitation. So we covered that. We said loud recitation, that's Fajr prayer, dawn prayer, and sunset prayer, and night prayer, and also some other prayers. We'll see when we come to them. There's only 5 prescribed daily prayers, but there are other prayers for other occasions and other reasons. So those other occasions and other reasons, do you recite aloud or do you recite low? We'll see when we get to them. As for the 5 daily prayers, the dawn prayer is recited aloud. The noon prayer is recited low. Reciting it low means just loud enough to hear yourself. That means the one next to you cannot hear you. So if you're reciting low, yani, if you're supposed to be reciting low and the one who's next to you can hear you, then you're not reciting low, you're reciting aloud. So dawn prayer, you recite aloud. Noon prayer, you recite low. Afternoon prayer, you recite low. Sunset prayer, you recite aloud. And nightfall prayer, you recite aloud. So the man recites aloud during the times of loud recitation. Audible, loud here means audible. You can hear it. The one next to you can hear you. If anything happened to him in the prayer, he says, Subhanallah. That means, for example, you're praying and you're following the imam, let's say, in the congregational prayer, and the imam made a mistake. So what do? You say, Subhanallah. Or, for example, you're praying and then someone is calling you. So you say, for example, Subhanallah. And the nakedness of the man, for the prayer we're talking about here, is what is between his navel and his knees. So the navel itself is not nudity, religious nudity. And the knees themselves are not religious nudity. But what is between them is. So you need to cover what's between the navel and the knees. And as a rule, in order to make sure that you covered all of that, you need to cover a little bit of your navel and you need to cover a little bit of your knee. The woman brings all of her parts together. So when she bows, her arms are close, pressed to her side. Her feet are together. Also, when the man is in standing position, His feet are apart. When the woman is in standing position and bowing position, her feet are together. When the man is in standing position and bowing position, his feet are apart. And when the woman bows, her arms are pressed to her sides. And when she prostrates, also her arms are pressed to her sides, and her stomach is closer to her thighs. So the woman brings all of her parts together. She lowers her voice in the presence of marriageable men. The man, he just recites aloud when it's time to recite aloud. The woman, if she's in the presence of marriageable men, she does not recite aloud. If anything happened to her in the prayer, she claps. That means she hits the back of her hand with her, she hits the back of her left hand with her right hand. And all of the body of the free woman is nakedness, except her face and her hands. Yani, she has to cover for her prayer all of her body except her face and her hands. From all directions except underneath. That's for the man and for the woman. And this is an important detail here. So here's a question here. Can a man read aloud for a prayer that is supposed to be read with a low voice if he is doing the prayer alone? So the man, yani, if you recite aloud in a time when the prayer should be low, or if you recite low when the prayer should be loud, it's valid and it's not a sin. But you will not get the reward of the sunnah. You didn't do what's better. So the man's issue is not about being alone or not alone. The man's issue is just that he's a man. So the man, he recites aloud when the prayer is to be recited aloud. And he recites low when the prayer is to be recited low. And the woman, if she's in the presence of marriageable men, then when it's a prayer for reciting aloud, she recites low. It's clear? Ameen Wafiq. So all of the body of the free woman is nakedness except her face and her hands. We're talking about for her prayer. So the face is from where? From the normal hairline to the chin, and from the ear to the ear. So the ear itself is on the head, that needs to be covered. And what's under the chin needs to be covered. What's under the chin needs to be covered. Sisters are so, yani, negligent here. Yani, I'm just saying what it is, the case. It's like the sisters do not, so many sisters do not want to cover what's under their chin. That little soft piece there that's under their chin, they will leave it open on purpose. So that's haram, yani, that's just easy haram to avoid right there. Or maybe some sisters don't know. And the hands, so the hand means what she can expose is from her fingertips to her wrist. From her fingertips to her wrist. Everything else needs to be covered. And that's from all directions except from underneath. From all directions except from underneath, and that's for the man too. From all directions except from underneath. So, a man's awrah, the Arabic word is awrah, the religious nudity or religious nakedness. The man's nakedness is what's between his navel and his knees. He has to cover that from all directions except underneath. The woman's nakedness is all of her body except her face and her hands. She has to cover that from all directions except underneath. What does that mean? That means this woman here, if she's standing on the ground and then you took a mirror and put that mirror next to her foot, could you see in the reflection of that mirror any of her nakedness? If so, then her prayer is not valid. If you could slide a mirror next to her foot while she's standing there, and then in the reflection of that mirror, you could see any of her nakedness, like you could see her leg because her pants leg is wide. And then if you put the mirror there, you would be able to see her leg there. Her prayer is not valid. Or, for example, if her cuffs are too wide and therefore you could see her forearm in her sleeve, her prayer is not valid. So that's why some sisters, when they pray, they tuck their pants into their socks, and they tuck their shirts into their pants, and they tuck their headscarves into their shirts, and they make sure that their cuffs are sealed. They might even have something that seals their cuffs, or even put socks over their hands. And it's not recommended for a woman to cover her face for her prayer. It's recommended for a woman to expose her face for her prayer. That's a proof that it's not obligatory to even cover the face. The fact that a woman should show her face while she prays, that's a proof that she's not obligated to cover her face when she's not praying. For the man, his awra is what's between his navel and his knees. So if you could see any of what's between his navel and his knees from any direction except underneath, so from the side or the top, then his prayer is not valid. Are we obligated to correct the women we see uncovering their necks? Is the ruling of the face by consensus? Are we obligated? So that's two different questions. Are we obligated to correct the women we see uncovering their necks? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadihi." Any one of you who sees something forbidden, then let him stop it with his hand. Let him change it with his hand. فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ. If he's unable to change it with his hand, then he has to change it with his tongue. فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ. And if he's unable to change it with his tongue, then he must hate it in his heart. Is the ruling of the face by consensus? Yes, it is. Question, if the parts accidentally uncover, will the prayer be invalid? Here you have two cases. If a person enters into the prayer able to do all of the moves of the prayer without the nakedness becoming exposed, but then it did become exposed, like the wind came and blew your clothing up, so it's out of your power, then if you recover that nakedness immediately, your prayer will stay valid. But if a person enters the prayer unable to do all of the moves of the prayer without the aura showing up, then when the aura shows up, your prayer is invalidated. So if a man had shorts on that went down to his knees, but when he's in the sitting position, those shorts will rise up and some of his thigh will become exposed. We're going according to Shafi'i school. This is Shafi'i school. If with the person, if he sat and then his if when he sat his shorts rose up and then some of his aura appeared, then his prayer is invalid because he entered the prayer unable to do all the moves of the prayer. Or for example, a man is wearing a t-shirt, it stops right at his waist. And if he were to bend over for ruku', some of his back will be exposed. Then his prayer will be invalid when his aura becomes exposed, because he entered the prayer unable to do all the moves of the prayer without his aura becoming exposed. Question, what if it was not by the wind in this case? So the wind is just an example. That's why I said it's out of your control, something that's out of your power. So,
Sheikh Roy?
so the issue. Oh, 1 second, please. So the issue is whether you were negligent or not. If you were negligent, that means you entered the prayer unable to do the moves of the prayer without your aura becoming exposed. Then, when your aura becomes exposed, your prayer is invalid. Yes, you're welcome. Yes, sister.
I just wanted to ask if a woman, like we put the socks on top of the pants and everything like that if the pants are wide. But if a woman doesn't and she has socks underneath, do we still tell her to put the socks on top? Because I'm trying to actually نجرب اضبط العبارة انه من كل الجوانب غير الاسفل. So I'm trying to figure it out.
If so, you can do the mirror test. If her aura, if you could put a mirror by her foot, and then in the reflection you could see any of her aura, then her prayer would not be valid. So then something needs to be done to fix her situation. Whether it's tucking her pants and her socks, or whether it's putting on a jalabiya over all of her clothes, whatever it is that she needs to do to fix that situation. You say even the hijab, that's not clear for me. What does the question mean? But the rule is this: what? The rule is the aura must be concealed from all directions except from underneath. So, if her aura can be seen from any direction except underneath, then her prayer is invalid. So, tuck it or put something over top of it. Whatever she does, she has to make sure that her aura cannot be seen from any direction except underneath.
So if she doesn't tuck it and it's only seen from underneath, is her prayer valid? I'm talking about the hijab.
Well, that's not going to be from underneath because that's like the highest part of her body in the first place.
Okay, so underneath means just from underneath where her feet are.
Yeah, from underneath of her aura, from underneath her nakedness, and her nakedness is all of her body except her face and her hands. That's why we said if you put the mirror next to her foot. That's clear? If you were
I'm
to put
still
the mirror, huh?
I'm still trying to think about it because I was talking about the hijab. Like if the
Yes.
hijab,
Yes,
yeah.
I understand. So what I'm saying is, so what's the rule? She has to cover all of her body except her face and her hands from all directions. So all of her body except her face and her hands from all directions except underneath of her aura, which is underneath of her body, basically, under her body, under her whole body. So the mirror on the floor means it's right there on the floor. So if any of her body, any of her aura, I'm not saying just her leg, if any of her aura could be seen in that reflection, then her prayer is invalid. Let's say she's standing on a transparent surface, and someone on a floor, a level, a tier, and it's transparent there. Maybe there's glass there, or maybe there's a metal grate there, and her clothes go all the way down to the ground. So if she were to bow or prostrate, it doesn't even lift up so that any of her body could appear. But if someone were underneath her, on the floor beneath her, and could look up, he could see her aura under her clothing. In this case, her prayer is valid. So is it clear? Okay. Question: is that the same if the person's chest or hair is exposed for a second, not due to negligence? It's okay if she covers it. So if it gets exposed because of negligence, negligence means you entered the prayer unable to do all the movements of the prayer without your aura showing up. So if she entered the prayer able to do all the moves of her prayer without her aura showing up, then she was not negligent. Then, if her aura showed up for some reason, means it was out of her power. So then she just recovers it immediately. So if her buttons come loose, that's on her. That's not out of her power. Making sure her buttons are fastened, that's in her power. That's within her power. That's not outside of her power. Okay. So let me repeat. The woman brings all of her parts together, lowers her voice in the presence of marriageable men. If anything happened to her in the prayer, she claps, yani she hits the back of her left hand with her right hand. And all of the body of the free woman is nakedness, except her face and her hands. Also, the skin and hair color need to be concealed for the man and the woman. The skin and hair color need to be concealed. And the slave woman is like a man. So if a slave woman prayed with what's between her navel and her knees covered, then her prayer is valid. So when the free woman covers her head, she goes out in public covering with hijab, that's an honor. It's not oppression, that's an honor. Who can walk around with her hair out? The slave woman is the one who can walk around with her hair out. If the slave woman gets free, then she has the honor of wearing her hijab on her head when she goes out. Chapter 11 things invalidate the prayer. Intentional talking, that means saying
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Sorry.
wa alaikum salam, yes.
Can you go back and say that one more time, please?
About the slave woman?
Yes.
The slave woman, she doesn't have to cover her hair when she goes out. So when the free woman is covering her head, wearing her hijab out in public, that's the honor that she has as a free woman to do that. It's the slave woman who can walk around outside without her hair covered. If that slave woman became free, then she has the honor of covering her head with the hijab, which is an obligation on her. Chapter 11 things invalidate the prayer. Intentional talking. This means talking normal talk. Yani talking to someone in the prayer while remembering that you're praying and knowing that it's haram. This will invalidate your prayer. Like you were praying, you said, "Hey, how's it going?" This will invalidate your prayer. Lots of motion. There's two sayings here. What does lots of motion mean? Some said it means 3 consecutive moves that are alien to the prayer. So, for example, according to that, you're praying, then you lifted your hand to scratch your head and then brought your hand back down. That's 1. Then you lifted it again to scratch again and brought it back down. That's 2. And then you did that again. That's 3. If you did that consecutively, this will invalidate your prayer according to this saying. This is the famous saying. The famous saying in the Shafi'i school. That means the widespread saying. 3 consecutive moves. According to that, if you were praying and you took 3 steps, this will invalidate your prayer. The other saying is that this means as many moves as what takes the time of an entire rak'ah. As many moves as what takes the time consecutively, consecutive moves as what takes the time of a rak'ah. And also, what invalidates the prayer? Ritual impurity, yani religious impurity. So you're praying and then you pass gas in your prayer, that breaks your wudu. Or you were praying and then someone of the opposite gender came and touched your skin, this will break your wudu. Or you were praying and you fell asleep not in a sitting position with your buttocks firmly planted. This will break your wudu. Or you were praying and you touched your private part with the inner palm. So all of these cases break your wudu. Then this will invalidate your prayer. Also, the occurrence of najis filth. If you have najis filth, unexcused najis filth on your body, your clothing, or your place of prayer, like feces or urine, this will invalidate your prayer. We talked about najis filth and in detail. Exposure of the nakedness, we just covered that. Changing the intention. So you're praying, and then while you're praying, you said, I don't want to pray anymore. I stopped my prayer. This invalidates your prayer. Or even if you doubted, should I stop my prayer? This will invalidate your prayer. Turning the back to the Qibla, or even turning off of the Qibla, is not a condition that you turn your whole back to the Qibla. Just turning away from your prayer direction, or even being turned off of your prayer direction, will invalidate your prayer. And don't listen to those people who say, oh, in some schools, you have a such and such degree of room of error, therefore you can face Northeast and North America. Because some schools say you have such and such degree for room of error. Those people are making a blunder here. It's obligatory on you to face what is your most confident direction. What you're most confident is correct direction, that's what you're obligated to face. If you turn away from that, your prayer is invalid, even if it was really the right Qibla. Let me say that again. Your obligation is to face what is your strongest confidence is the correct direction. If you turn away from that, then your prayer will be invalid even if the direction you turn to is the right direction. Your prayer will be invalid. What those people are saying is that you're allowed to just, you got like they say 45-degree room for error. What they mean is you can just pray any way you want within that span. That's not what those scholars are saying. Those are people who want to make an excuse for themselves to pray the wrong way while they know better. Also, eating and drinking while remembering that you're praying and knowing that that's haram, that will break your prayer. Even swallowing the mucus from your head, that will invalidate your prayer. Or swallowing anything other than your pure saliva. Think about praying like fasting. When you're in your prayer, it's like you're fasting. You can't eat or drink. What would invalidate your fast while you're praying, when it comes to talking about eating and drinking, would invalidate your prayer. And laughing, Abu Shuja' says laughing, but that goes back to speaking. The similarity is the pronunciation of letters. So if you laughed in your prayer, producing letters in your prayer that are not part of the prayer, while you're able to detain yourself, and you said, for example, in your prayer, ha, 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 this will invalidate your prayer. Or if you said, ha, 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 this will invalidate your prayer. And apostasy, yani going out of Islam, will invalidate your prayer. Question here. Alcohol also, yes, alcohol is najis. Alcohol, but yani khamr is najis. Khamr, wine, that's filth. The word alcohol is a chemical name that's used for many things or more than one thing. Not everything that's called alcohol is filthy. Ether alcohol or ether or ethanol, all of that, that's the same thing. That's all filthy. And isopropyl alcohol, we learned that that's not filthy. Question: if it's a passing thought of should I stop my prayer, is that sufficient to invalidate the prayer? Yani, the person said to himself, should I stop my prayer? Then he invalidated his prayer. Question: if a woman prays behind her mahram and she notices something wrong, can she say subhanallah? It will not invalidate her prayer. She should hit the back of her hand. One thing I'll advise you, brothers and sisters, when it comes to learning these religious rules, these rules are easy. Take them at their face value. Take those rules at their face value, or else you're going to be confused about things. So, for example, if a person was praying, and then while he was praying, he said to himself, should I stop my prayer or shouldn't I? Then he invalidated his prayer. You said, for those that have constant mucus and they can't help but swallow during the prayer, is there something else they do? They cannot swallow the mucus in their prayer. This will invalidate the prayer. They spit it out. You have to spit it out. You can't swallow it. If you can't spit on the ground, you can spit into your clothing. And the Prophet said so, alayhi salatu wassalam. Ameen wa fikum. Chapter. There are 17 obligatory rak'ahs. What are those? 2 for the dawn prayer, 4 for the noon prayer, 4 for afternoon prayer, 3 for sunset prayer, 4 for nightfall prayer. That's 17. Question: but if you turn to spit in your clothes, don't turn, just spit in your clothes. That's all. You don't have to turn to spit into your clothes. Like, you can spit into your cuff, spit into your pocket, spit into your collar, for example. If you have a scarf on, just spit into your scarf, like that.
Sheikh, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So, quick question back to what you were saying, because I'm just trying to clear it up.
Mm-hmm.
So, if let's say a person consumes alcohol or liquor, their prayer is
Valid.
valid, but
Yes.
it's not affordable, right?
Correct. That's correct.
And that's for fasting too, right?
I haven't heard. But for the prayer, the difference. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I thought I heard that that it was invalid and the person had to make it up.
No, incorrect. The difference is that the alcohol is inside of his body. So what's going to invalidate your prayer is the filth being on your body, not inside your body, because you already have filth inside your body anyway. You can pray with the blood in your veins and whatever is digesting in your stomach. If that were to come out, it would just be vomit and the urine in your bladder, etc. That's not going to invalidate your prayer.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So there are 17 obligatory rak'ahs. I just counted them for you. Within them are 34 prostrations, 94 takbirs, 9 tashahhuds, 10 salams, and 153 sayings of subhanallah. The sum of the integrals of the prayer is 126. There are 30 integrals in the subh prayer, 42 in maghrib prayer, and 54 in the fourfold prayers. Now, I just ran through that really quick. Some explainers of Abu Shuja' said, this paragraph has little benefit. But there is benefit in this paragraph, especially for the beginners, because what you're going to do, you got one of two people here. One is just going to hear what was just said right there and say, okay, fine, and that's it, and you'll never think about it again. And the other one is the one who's going to take what was said right there and then sit down at the table, for example, and figure it out. That's studying. Say, 94? 94 takbirs? Let me count those out. Let me see. How is that? 34 prostrations? Really? Let's see. Okay. That's a study. That's good. That's a benefit. 30 integrals in subh prayer. That's fajr prayer. 42 in maghrib prayer. 54 in the fourfold prayers. Figure it out. That's a study. That's good for you. Whoever is unable to stand in the obligation sits. Whoever is unable to stand in the obligation sits. Some people can stand for the obligation and they sit anyway. It's not valid. Like some brothers or even sisters, and they're older. I've seen this from some older brothers and sisters. Or they can stand and have a conversation with you, or they could stand and wait for the bus, or they could stand in the line at the market while they're buying their stuff. But when it's time to pray, they got to sit down. So be mindful there. Whoever is able to stand in the obligation has to stand. Whoever is unable to stand in the obligation sits. Whoever is unable to sit lays on his side, preferably the right side. So when I say preferably, what does that mean? When I say preferably the right side, what does that mean?
It's not wajib.
Correct. It's not wajib. It's not obligatory. Why I'm saying that? Because right now I'm saying preferably on his right side, and then someone will ask me, well, what if he lays on his left side? That means not comprehending what I'm saying. There's more details here. We could go further, but I'm just going to stick to the text. When we go over an explanation that has more details, we can read them, inshallah. And in fact, here now we're at the chapter of prostration of forgetfulness, but our hour is just about up. So we might as well stop here at the top of this heading and save this one for next week. Another lesson that went so fast, subhanallah. Any other question I can answer for you? Question concerning the awrah for woman. Is her prayer valid if she wears a cloth in pieces instead of a whole cloth? For example, she wears a dress separately, which well above her ankle, but underneath she has her trousers and her sleeves also. Yeah, all of that's fine. Yani, I'll tell you like what I mentioned in a different class before this. These religious rules, they are very abstract. You take them for their face value, then you'll find that they are very applicable to many, 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 many situations. Look at people all over the world. Islam is for people all over the world in all sorts of situations. So what's the rule here? The rule is she has to cover her awrah, all of her body except her face and her hands, from all directions except underneath. Look how general and abstract that is. So that doesn't mean she has to wear one piece, or she has to wear two pieces, or three pieces, or she has to wear pants, or she can't wear pants, or it doesn't mean any of that. It means she has to cover her nakedness. So if she covered her nakedness with leaves, her prayer is valid. If she covered her nakedness with clay, mud, her prayer is valid. That's how those religious rules go. Amin Wafiq. So this is for everybody, you want to understand these religious rules. There tends to be, especially when we're first starting out, there tends to be something that just makes our minds locked. These religious judgments should open your mind. Break some things that keep your mind from more abstract perception. See how generally worded these rules are. They're like that on purpose. We Muslims, the way we talk about our religion is not the way the kuffar talk about stuff. Kuffar, they say stuff that's not at all precise very many times. A lot of percentage of the times, they don't talk precisely. Our religion and our Muslim scholars are not like that. MashaAllah. These rules of the religion, they give you everything that you need, and they exclude everything. Everything that's included is included, and everything that's excluded is excluded. When you learn these religious rules, you see how they are worded, yani, with the condition you're learning from reliable source. Not a Wahhabi, for example. Well, Wahhabi's going to say stuff that's not precise. For example, Wahhabi will say, oh, I forgot what they said, 6 conditions for La ilaha illallah. Really? 6 conditions? They'll say, yeah, this and this and this and this and this and this. Okay, why you stop there? What made you just say you just came up with 6 rules and that's it? You just imagined 6 things and said that's it? And there's no reason, there's not a 7th one? Said that's what our rules are not like that. Or like when the Wahhabis said, there's 3 aspects of Tawheed. Tawheed uluhiyah, Tawheed rububiyah, and Tawheed asma' wa sifat. Why you stop there? Why you stop there? There's no reason why you didn't say there's a 4. Why is not a Tawheed rizqiyah and Tawheed qudriyah or all kinds of stuff? If you wanted to keep going like that, you could. Then what they would say, they say, no, because all of those, they go back to uluhiyah and rububiyah. Okay, why did you separate those? Why you separated uluhiyah and rububiyah in the first place? Because he has no reason to, because they don't know how to categorize things. So that's not how our religious rules are. If you're learning from us, our stuff's not like that. So when we say these things like that, it's like what I'm saying to you now. Question, prayer with a lighter is invalid? You're asking me because of whatever is the fuel inside the lighter? Your question is about the liquid fuel inside the lighter? Anyway, it depends if that's what you're asking me. Depends on what is the substance of that. If it's najis, then you cannot pray with it. If it's not najis, then you can. It's always going to go back to the rule. So, brothers and sisters, when you learn these rules that we mention here, refer your questions back to the rule. I'm not saying don't ask. I'm just saying for your own comprehension of religious judgments. If you want to understand the religion, but I know that not everybody has the same level of comprehension. But, Yani, I'm just trying to help you out, everyone, not anyone in particular here. When you learn these rules, you take your question and refer it back to the rule. So many times, a person will ask me a question, so I'll tell him the rule. So that's going to have the answer for his question there. Then it's going to change the question a little bit and repose the question. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell him the rule. You maybe y'all saw me do that so many times. So go back to the rule. And then after I told him the rule 3 times, say, okay, I understand now. But that's fine. Barakallahu feekum. Any other questions? And if I've been rude today, please pardon me. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.